Have you ever thought about what a single word can do to a man? I'm not talking about pretty words, I'm talking about never, thrown like a stone. That's what I heard from my own son, a grown man, when he caught me with another man in the backyard. He walked in without knocking, saw me and stopped at the door as if he'd stumbled upon a fire. I raised my hand and tried to say, "Calm down, listen to me," but he cut me short. Never again. And he left. The gate remained open. The wind rushed through the house, and I stood there with my heart pounding, unsure whether to close the door or my chest. It hurts to remember, I know, but that's how the truth arrives, without asking permission. If you like real-life stories, stay with me. There's family, silence, secrets, desire, guilt, respect, and courage. There's love that arrived late, and fear that arrived early. I'll speak simply, the way we speak on the porch, looking out at the street. I'll tell you how I arrived that day in the key backyard with a man, and why my son, my flesh and blood, chose to turn his back rather than listen to me. It started on a random Saturday, clothes on the clothesline, an old radio whispering old-fashioned music, the smell of beans in the pot. I'd been living alone for a while. The house was too big, the bed too cold, the urge to talk, but no one to. My wife passed away years ago. After she left, I hid in my workshop, screws, hammers, the noise of a compressor, football on Sundays, bar talk, to avoid talking about myself. On the outside, I was the same guy, serious, quiet, proper. Inside, a closet full of closed boxes. One was labeled love, the other man. I pushed these boxes back, but they banged against the walls of my chest every night. The first person to stare at me wasn't my son. It was the mirror, unshaven, his shirt too open in the heat, his eyes tired of pretending. When did I stop living? I thought. That week, I accepted a silly invitation, a beer at a discreet bar. Dimly lit, a table in the corner. A young man came up to the bar, smiled the way no one smiles at an old man, and asked if I wanted company. I said yes, but not in a rush. I wanted to talk. He talked about the neighborhood, his mother, the rent. I talked about the workshop, my grandson, my knees hurting when it rained. We laughed for no reason. When I went to pay, he said, "If you want, we can go for a walk." I wasn't a child. I knew what he lived for. And even though I knew, I said yes. Other nights came. Sometimes I called, sometimes he called. I won't lie. There was a kiss, a hand on my face, a warm breath on the back of my neck, a skin-awakening experience. No dirty details, no bravado. What we had was simple. Two men meeting without a watch in their pockets, without judgment on their lips. I paid for the time, but the affection came along with it, and it dismantled me. It's easy to point fingers when your bed is warm. It's hard to understand the emptiness when no one calls your name. Sometimes he just lay with me in the living room, his head on my shoulder, a movie playing with no one watching. Other times we walked to the square, feeling the wind, talking about nothing, like someone finding the courage to exist. There was a day I didn't want to pay, not out of poverty, out of truth. I said, just stay for coffee, just to listen to the rain, just to talk nonsense. He stayed. We shared bread and butter, laughed at silly jokes, and when the thunder rumbled loudly, he pulled me by the arm and pressed me against the eaves there in the backyard. The smell of wet earth wafted up, the water hitting the ground made music, and I forgot my age. An old man's kiss also trembles, you know? The difference is that we know the weight of the hand that holds the world and still decide to let go a little. It was that night that my son arrived early. He didn't warn me. He opened the gate, walked in without knocking, and saw. He saw a man, holding another by the waist. He saw my head resting on his chest. He saw my open laughter, something he'd never seen before. My laughter died when my son's eyes met mine. He stood rigid in the doorway. I said, "Listen to me." He cut me off. Never again. The word pierced the yard like a knife. The boy released my waist, took 2 steps back, whispered a good night that sounded like an apology, and walked away with light steps, as if he didn't want to break anything. You might think the story ends there, that I cringed, asked for forgiveness, promised never again, went to pray for healing. No, I sat in the backyard chair, took off my flip-flops, and cried the way a man never learns. I cried with anger for wasted time, with pity for myself, with pity for him, my boy who grew up thinking love only comes in one form. I let it rain until the water washed my face. When the rain stopped, I closed the gate, and I also closed the guilt that had been crushing me since I was 20. The next Day silence was my most faithful companion. My son didn't answer, didn't write, didn't send a message through his grandson. My daughter-in-law pretended she didn't recognize me on the sidewalk. At the garage, 2 customers made jokes that I pretended not to hear. I kept quiet all day, but that night I grabbed my phone, opened the contact list we keep hidden, and called a number that promised discreet company, no questions asked. It was a different number, not the one from the cafe. He arrived, quickly, smelling of cheap cologne, clean sneakers, a polite smile. I didn't buy a body, I bought silence. I asked him to sit with me in the kitchen, listen to me without judgment, let the night pass. He stayed. We talked about bills, fears, the near future. When he left a note. If you just need to talk, I'll be back. On the 3rd day, I returned to the bar. The same counter, the same sweaty glass. I sat in the corner. The guy with the first smile wasn't there. A colleague came. You okay?" he asked softly, as if speaking to an open wound. I shrugged. He said, "We're not salvation, but we're not sin either. Sometimes we just hold the ladder." I swallowed hard. I bought another beer. I didn't buy anyone. I bought time to think. I remembered my wife, the love we had in any way possible, the respect I always gave. I remembered the boy I was, hiding the sparkle in my eyes when a friend hugged me tighter. I remembered everything I buried to fit into other people's worlds. Now you might ask, what about the son? What about the family? What about the honor of a lifetime? Calm down. Life doesn't fit into a single label. I didn't become a different man overnight. I simply stopped hiding the man I've always been. And making such a decision has a price. It's risky. Some people turn their backs, some call it courage, some call it madness. In my case, there was a never again that echoes in the hallway every time I turn off the light. But the hallway also leads to the kitchen, and the kitchen leads to the backyard, and the backyard leads to me. If I don't find myself there, no one will find me. Late in the afternoon, I went to buy bread. A car pulled up slowly beside me. The window rolled down. It was the same guy from the bar, the one with the first smile. "Can I talk for 2 minutes?" he asked. I got in. The smell of rain still lingered in the air. "Your son came to me," he said. "He wanted to know if I was using you." I told him no. He called me all sorts of names and left. My heart froze. "And you?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "I came back to tell you that you're not alone. If you want, I'll stay. If not, I'll leave now and never come back." I was quiet for what felt like a lifetime. Then I said, "Stay, even if it's just to have coffee and talk about nothing." He stayed. There was no rush, no contract. There was an open house, freshly brewed coffee, a banging pot, a wide-open window. He listened to me talk about my childhood, the fear of being discovered, the marriage that was companionship and silence. I listened to his stories, the falls, the bills, the fake names on the phone. 2 men, 2 twisted lives, 1 backyard. When night fell, he asked, "Do you want me to come back tomorrow?" And I, who had spent my life saying no to myself, said, "I do." It was that simple. If you've come this far, answer me honestly. When was the last time you breathed without asking permission? I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to stay a little longer and listen to what came after that never again, because what happened in the following days shook me, my home, and my son's heart in ways I couldn't have imagined. The next part begins when the doorbell rang very early, and on the other side of the door was someone I didn't expect to see. Want to know who it was and what they said? Then stay with me, because I'm going to open that door right now. The doorbell rang again, insistent, as if fate were in a hurry. Before I open the door and let what's coming in, let me ask you something man to man from someone who's lived through a lot and learned from the suffering of silence. Comment here on what this story sparked inside you. When you write, I understand if the message got through, if the pain, courage, and respect resonated with you. Write, "I heard," if this conversation reached you. Or courage, if you know what it's like to hold the weight of a secret for years. This isn't just engagement. It's our way of measuring whether the content was clear, if the story hit the right spot, and if it's worth continuing to open doors that many people prefer to keep locked. If this video made you think, like it now, because a like shows the algorithm and me that it's worth continuing to tell the truth without beating around the bush. And if you want to walk with me to the end of this road, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This way, you won't miss the next chapter. You'll understand each piece of this puzzle, and you'll give me the strength to keep this conversation alive that so many people need to have but can't find anywhere. Now breathe with me, write your comment, like it, confirm your subscription, because I'm going to turn the doorknob, and when that door opens, nothing will be the same again. The doorbell rang again, louder, as if fate had lost its patience. I walked slowly to the door, my heart pounding like a hammer. When I opened it, he was there, the same young man, wet with rain, his gaze silent, as if he knew he was entering a place he already knew too well. "I just came to see if you were okay," he said softly. His "sir" passed through me. It sounded like respect and distance at the same time. I nodded. He came in, took off his soaked coat, and stood there in the middle of the living room, between the rug and the smell of coffee still wafting from the kitchen. "It's cold," I said, just to break the air. He replied, "You were very lonely yesterday." And that was when I realized he knew. He knew my son's word. He knew about the open gate. He knew the damage guilt does to a man when he closes his heart. We were silent for a while, listening to the water dripping from his clothes onto the floor. The house seemed to breathe with us. I tried to thank him, to tell him not to worry, but he cut me off with a light gesture. I didn't come to collect. I just came to stay a while, and he stayed. I sat in the chair, he at the other end of the table. We talked about small things, about the burnt beans, the game I hadn't watched, the relentless rain. His voice had the calm of someone living on the edge, but still believing in some kind of goodness. Little by little, the silence settled between us, not as emptiness but as rest. After a while, he got up and went to the kitchen. He grabbed the kettle, relit the stove, and made coffee, as if he'd lived there for years. The ease with which he moved dismantled me. I watched every gesture and thought it had been a long time since I'd seen someone act fearlessly in my home. When he placed the cup on the table, our hands touched. It was brief, but enough to remind me that skin also speaks. He laughed lightly, and his laughter had the same sound as the rain falling in the yard. We talked until dawn. He told me about his tough childhood, his father who left home early, his mother who cleaned hotels, and the day he learned that sometimes a body is the only currency the world accepts. I listened to it all with a lump in my throat. He spoke shamelessly, and I felt ashamed that I'd never had the courage to be so honest. When it was too late to leave, I offered the guest room. He thanked me but said, "I can stay in the living room if you'd like company," and I did. There was no rush, no promises, just two men sitting on the same couch, sharing a blanket and a silence that didn't weigh them down. His head rested on my shoulder. The scent of soap mixed with rain brought a peace I couldn't even remember. There was nothing vulgar, just the warmth of being alive and at ease. I felt my heart race, but it wasn't blind desire. It was tenderness, the kind of touch that heals more than it hurts. Sometime in the early morning he fell asleep. I stared at his face, calm, unmasked, and thought about how the world judges without knowing anything. I grabbed a blanket and slowly covered his shoulders, afraid to disturb the little peace that remained in that room. That's when I realized what was truly frightening me. It wasn't what we'd done in the backyard. It was what I was feeling now, a desire to stay. The sun began to rise timidly, and the house seemed different. When he woke, he apologized for sleeping there. I told him I didn't need to. "I don't usually sleep well at a client's house," he said, smiling. And I replied without thinking, "I don't usually sleep well with anyone here either." We laughed together, like two children, unsure of what's coming next. He left soon after, leaving a faint scent in the air and a different emptiness, less heavy, almost pleasant. The day went on strangely. In the workshop, the hammer and wrench made excessive noise. I tried to concentrate, but my thoughts kept returning to the early morning. In the middle of the afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. "Can I come by tomorrow just to chat?" There was no name, but I knew who it was. I deleted it, wrote "no need," and then, right after, wrote "come," sending it without thinking, like someone who accepts what they don't understand. That night I stood on the porch waiting for darkness to fall. The street was empty, the radio off, only the sound of crickets and the wind blowing through the gate. The memory of my son's words still hurt, but it didn't hurt as much anymore. What frightened me now was how loneliness can become habit, and how habit can kill a man inside. I still didn't know if what I felt was passion, need, or a slice of freedom I'd never experienced. I only knew I wanted to feel it again. Before entering, I looked out at the backyard and imagined the scene as if it was still happening. The touch on the waist, the interrupted laughter, my son's gaze, the rain falling. Everything blended together in the same place. I closed my eyes and thought, if the price of living is being judged, then I'll pay it. I went inside. turned off the lights, and left the window open, just to see if the wind would bring back the smell of coffee and rain that had lingered that morning. Now tell me, have you ever felt like experiencing something even though you knew it would hurt? Have you ever held on to a secret so heavy that your whole body felt tired? If this story is reaching you, comment below "I feel" or "I've been through this," so I know there are more people on the other side truly listening. This shows me it's worth continuing, that what I'm sharing here isn't just my life. It's a reflection of the lives of many people who are still afraid to let themselves go. Write it down so I know you're with me, because what comes next will move you even deeper. The next night, the house seemed even bigger. The couch was empty, the smell of yesterday's coffee still lingering. I waited for the boy to return, but my phone was silent. No messages, no signal. His absence carried the same weight as my son's gaze, a silence that pulls you inward. I paced the living room, checking the clock, opening and closing the curtains for no reason, until I saw in the corner of my phone a discreet ad, "Relaxing massage for gentlemen, absolute confidentiality." I stopped there. The text was direct, almost cold, but there was one word that pulled me in: relaxing. I didn't want pleasure, I wanted peace. Or maybe it was just a way to trick my longing. I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, deep, without a boyish accent. "I can be there in 20 minutes, he said. His voice was that of someone who knows what he's doing and what he promises. When I hung up, I looked at myself in the living room mirror. Wrinkled shirt, disheveled hair, sunken eyes. I thought about giving up, but I couldn't. It was as if my body was too tired to keep pretending it didn't need touch. When the doorbell rang, the air seemed to still. I opened the door and saw an older man, maybe 10 years younger than me. A grey beard, a firm gaze, and large hands. "I'm Raphael," he said, the way he said my name. Afterward, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Antonio," sounded as if he'd known me for a long time. His tone wasn't one of conquest, but rather of someone who understood what the other person was looking for without needing to ask. He came in, set his backpack down, and looked around like someone reading the history of a house just by its smell. "Your house is beautiful," he commented. I laughed awkwardly. "Not beautiful, just old and full of silence." He didn't answer. He grabbed a clean towel I'd left on the chair and said, "Let's start slowly." His voice seemed to calm the noise in my head. When he placed his hands on my shoulders, I felt a shiver that wasn't from fear. It was a kind of memory, the feeling of being noticed. Time stood still there. His hands roamed my body respectfully, unhurriedly. It wasn't vulgarity, it was humanity. A touch that said, "You're still alive." I closed my eyes and let whatever came, the longing, the regret, the pent-up desire, come. At one point he stopped and said, "There's no need to be ashamed. Every man has the right to be touched with affection." The phrase swirled inside me. No one had ever said that out loud. Not my wife, not my friends, not my own reflection. When he finished, he covered my back with the towel and sat in the armchair in silence. The yellow light in the room made the space calm, almost sacred. I stood up slowly, still dizzy, and asked how much he owed. He replied, "It's priceless when what you need is your soul, not your body." I insisted, and he accepted but refused the change. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, "If you want, I can come back just to talk. Loneliness doesn't always need skin." After the door closed, I stood there, trying to understand what it all meant. It wasn't just need, it was a mixture of desire and guilt, a desire to repeat and, at the same time, to escape. But deep down, I knew. That touch had opened a door inside me that I no longer knew how to close. And when a door like that opens, it's hard to pretend it doesn't exist. Over the next few days, I began searching for his name in the messages, but there was no trace. Instead, other contacts appeared: discreet escort, special massage, adult conversation. Each message felt like a temptation. Sometimes I deleted it, sometimes I replied. It was as if a part of me had woken up too late and now couldn't sleep. I caught myself looking in the mirror before leaving the house, fixing my hair, changing my shirt, wanting to look better. Not to anyone in particular, but to feel like I still mattered. One night, loneliness gripped me more than usual. The radio played softly, and the sound of the workshop still echoed in my head. I picked up my cell phone and typed again. "I need to relax." This time, another man answered, younger, his voice cheerful, almost playful. "Don't worry, sir, I know how to be light-hearted." Light-hearted. That word convinced me. When he arrived, I realized it wasn't calm I was looking for. It was distraction. He laughed easily, talked too much, filled the house with life. But amidst the laughter and the smell of cheap perfume, I realized I was sinking into a dangerous cycle. The more I sought peace, the more confusion I found. After he left, the room was filled with a scent that mixed cologne and regret. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall, my body feeling hot and my heart cold. I didn't know if I was becoming an addiction, an escape, or a punishment. I only knew that, for the first time, pleasure was accompanied by an even greater emptiness. The next morning I found a note left at the gate. The handwriting was the same as the first guy, the one from the bar. Be careful what you look for. Not every touch heals. I held the note in my hands, my chest tight, and the feeling that someone was watching me. I went back inside and closed all the windows. For the first time I felt afraid of what I was becoming. And now I ask you, man to man, have you ever tried to fill a void and ended up losing your way? Have you ever confused affection with escape? If this story touches you in any way, comment below, I understand, or I've felt this, so I know I'm not talking to myself. Write it down, because what comes next will be the most tense moment of everything I've experienced. I stood there for a long time with the note in my hand, as if holding proof that I'm not crazy. The handwriting was the first boy's, I was sure, but the question that gnawed at me was another. How? Did he know? How did he know there was another man, another night, another story? I closed the gate slowly, looked around, and felt something different. A silence that wasn't peaceful but rather vigilant. The kind of silence that gives the impression that someone is watching you from within the shadows. I left the note on the table and went to the window. The street was empty, only the flickering streetlight in the corner. Even so, I felt eyes on me. I remembered his saying, "Not every touch heals." It was a warning, or a threat. That night I slept poorly. I woke to every noise, the creaking of wood, the wind hitting the gate, the barking of the neighbor's dog. In the darkness, every sound became a confession. In the morning, my phone rang. An unknown number. "Did you enjoy last night?" the message said. I froze. I deleted it before even thinking. Seconds later, another arrived. "We can do it again, or I'll tell your son." The letters trembled on the screen as if they were alive. The coffee went cold on the table. My throat went dry. I didn't know if it was the new guy, the old one, or someone who just wanted to see me fall. Shame came before anger. Shame for having let myself be filmed, for having trusted strangers, for having believed I could live in hiding. I thought about answering, but fear overcame me. Instead, I turned off my phone and walked out into the street, gasping for air. Every face I passed seemed to know. The baker didn't meet my eyes. The neighbor on the corner waved, but too quickly. And the worst part was the doubt. Did they really know, or was it just guilt playing tricks on me? On the way to the workshop, I found a note stuck to the wall. Wanted, services for gentlemen. The contact's name was different, but the number was the same one that had texted me. My stomach sank. I stopped at a bar to try to think. I ordered a pinga, something I hadn't done in years. The owner glanced at me sideways and asked, "Is everything okay?" "Antonio." I said yes, but my voice was crooked. As I left, I noticed a black car slowly driving behind me. I looked once, twice, 3 times. The car braked when I stopped and moved forward when I walked. I turned the corner and entered the first open gate I saw. It was an old empty workshop. I waited for the car to pass and stood there, leaning against the wall, trying to calm my heart. That night I decided to face it. I turned on my phone. 3 new messages. "Someone's curious about you. Where does your son live? We can talk." I didn't answer, but something inside me told me the danger had already passed the door. I remembered the first boy again, his look, his care, and the warning in the note. Did he know something? Was he trying to protect me? Or was it all part of the game? I started locking the gate with a chain and sleeping with the lights on. The radio, which had once been my companion, became an unbearable noise. Every word seemed to hide another behind it. I longer knew if the fear was real or if it was being created within me. The mirror showed a different man, older, more tired, his gaze always fixed on the window. 2 days later, I heard footsteps in the yard, low, light, as if someone was testing the ground before stepping foot. My heart leaped. I grabbed the flashlight and walked slowly to the door. When I opened it, I saw no one, just the wind shaking the fence and the gate ajar. On the ground, a wet shoe print. The same soul I'd seen the night my son caught me. The same print from the first guy. The doubt became a maze. Was he trying to protect me or remind me of something I wanted to forget? I went back inside and locked the doors. The note was still on the table. I looked at it again and noticed something I hadn't seen before. A stain in the corner, almost faded, that looked like it had been written by another pen. I brought the light closer and read it. Underneath the phrase, "Not every touch heals," someone had scrawled, "They're watching over you." I froze. Who was looking? Who was looking at me? And why? In that moment, I understood that the danger wasn't just what I'd done, but what I might reveal. There was something bigger going on, and maybe I'd been just a pawn. Regret and fear mingled like the smell of iron and gasoline. I felt like past and present were colliding, and that this time, it wasn't just about love. It was about survival. Now tell me, have you ever felt like someone was watching you, even when you were alone? Have you ever felt like someone knew what you were hiding without you ever telling them? If this has happened, comment below, "I saw it," or "I felt it." I want to know if you understand this kind of silence that screams from within, because what comes next will show how far a man's loneliness can go when fear decides to stay. I left the window, but the feeling of an eye on my back lingered. I worked in the garage, trying to forget, and my mind returned to the note and the messages. Late in the afternoon, I decided, if I'm going to be afraid, let it be with the lights on. I returned to the bar where it all began. The same counter, the radio blaring, people pretending not to see. I sat in the corner. I waited for the first guy. He didn't show up. A thin guy with a low cap came in. He stopped near the bathroom and stared at me for a second. When I stood up, he followed me as if bumping into me. He whispered, "You've been asking for too much work. Be careful not to make the news." I asked who he was. He laughed toothlessly. "I'm just a message." He disappeared. I returned to the counter with a cold stomach. The attendant whispered, "Don't mess with the people in the back. They sell company and sell problems." I paid and left, trying to appear calm. On the street, a black car slowly turned the corner. I turned the other way and walked to the square. I sat down and let time pass. My phone vibrated. "If you want peace, make a transfer." The amount was, "Hi." Another message, "If you don't pay, your son will receive a video." I asked which one. They sent a link. I didn't open it. I knew. The yard, the rain, my laughter. I took a deep breath. Instead of paying in the dark, I wanted to see the face of the one threatening me. I replied, "I'll pay in cash in person." It took a while, but it came. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock at night. Old Market parking lot. Envelope. Alone. I spent the night in the living room, remembering my wife, the boy I was, the hidden man. I thought about the first boy and the note. "They're watching over you," I wanted to believe. The time had come. I put half of what they asked for to buy time in the envelope. The parking lot's yellow light was failing. I leaned against a pillar, counting my own breaths. A man approached, hooded, broad shoulders, the posture of someone in charge. He stopped 2 steps away from me. He said the rest would be after the silence. I asked for a guarantee. He placed the phone against my chest. A thumbnail on the screen. I recognized my window frame. I handed him the envelope. He weighed the money and said, "2 more payments and you're gone. Stop playing at life. Old men can't handle scandal." The sentence cut off. Footsteps echoed from the other side. We turned. The first guy was there, unafraid. He asked the man if he was extorting me. He told the guy to get lost. The guy said they filmed old men with hidden cameras, sold security guards, and used clients as bait. The hood advanced. I said I'd pay the other 2, but I wanted the video now. He laughed. "It doesn't exist now." So I did what life taught me. Pretend to accept. Buy time. Find the exit. I looked over my shoulder and yelled, "Police!" He turned instinctively. The guy pulled my arm. We ran between cars and out through a hallway onto the side street. We entered a simple building and went up 2 flights. On the stairs, he told me I wouldn't go back there alone. They didn't want money. They wanted control. We sat down and he told me what he knew. A man named Japa and another named Dentino ran 2 groups, one for clients and the other for recordings. The list was filled with embarrassed men, widowers, separated, men who wouldn't go to the police. My name was on the list because someone filmed the night of the rain. I remembered the nervous masseur and the excuse about the security camera. I remembered the neighbor behind the curtain. It could all be a clue or paranoia. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. It contained part of what he'd downloaded. He said he'd tried to protect his clients and had it left for him. He placed it in my hand like an expensive medicine. He asked me not to open it just anywhere. If I did, I didn't want to be alone. I asked why. He said I'd see familiar names, men who smile in public and bleed at home. We took the long way back to my house. At the gate, he hesitated. If I let him, it would become more than friendship. It would become loyalty. I pushed my way through. The kitchen smelled of coffee. I sat down with the device. He closed the curtains and turned off the front light. There was a silent intimacy between us. I thanked him. He said he couldn't do anything else. I plugged the flash drive into the workshop's old laptop. The screen took a while to light up, folders with simple names. One said, Yard 1. Another, Yard 2. My hands were sweating. I opened the Yard folder. I didn't press play. My throat closed. Instead, I opened a document with numbers. At the top, preferred contacts. In the middle, my son's number. The world went dark. The boy grabbed my shoulder and urged calm. He said sometimes they save numbers just to scare people. I wanted to believe him. The phone vibrated again. A message from another number. You have 24 hours or your son will receive a link. The boy took the device, typed quickly, and switched the conversation to an app that deletes messages. He replied, tomorrow, same time, but you're the one. Who shows up? Then a short audio message closed. He then looked at me calmly and said we would record them, not to expose the world, to take my life off the leash. I asked if he was sure. He said he was also on the list and that he was tired. We didn't speak for a while. The house shrank and grew. I knew that if I pressed play, I would break inside. If I did nothing, they would come crashing in through the front door. Growing old is choosing which pain we endure. I chose the pain of truth. Now tell me, man to man, would you stay or run? Have you ever been at a crossroads where every choice hurts? If this story resonates with you, comment I choose truth or courage. And if you think recording these men is madness or salvation, write madness or salvation. I read everything. It's our way of measuring whether it's worth opening the next chapter. Night fell early that day. The sky was heavy, and the air felt different, as if it knew what we were about to do. The young man arrived with a small backpack and a determined look in his eyes. Inside, a hidden recorder and a cell phone set to record everything without turning on the screen. We need proof, not a fight, he said. I tried to laugh, but my voice faltered. It had been a while since I'd seen myself in the mirror with that kind of fear. The fear of someone who has more to lose than to gain. We set the kitchen table as if it were a ritual. Paper, pen, the flash drive still connected to the laptop, and 2 cups of coffee that cooled quickly. He calmly explained the plan to me. You go to the meeting, I'll stay a safe distance away recording. If anything goes wrong, I'll call a contact who can help. I asked who the contact was. He replied, an old client, a retired police officer. Discreet. The word discreet comforted and frightened me at the same time. I put on a dark jacket and tucked the envelope with some cash into my inside pocket. It wasn't courage I felt. It was necessity. We only face fear when the silence hurts more than it does. Before leaving, the young man placed his hand on my shoulder and said, I know you think you're too old for this, but courage doesn't age. I wanted to say something in response, but I couldn't. The old market parking lot seemed even emptier. The lights flickered, the wet ground reflecting the shadows of parked cars. I waited in the same spot as the night before. The clock struck 7:10 when the black car appeared. The headlights blinded me for a moment. 2 men got out. One was the one with the hood, now without it. The other was new, a tattoo on his neck, a cold look in his eyes. Did you bring the rest? The older man asked. I took a deep breath, took out the envelope and said, I brought enough. He laughed. Enough is what we say it is. The second man stepped forward. Where's the flash drive? Feigning calm, I pulled the one the boy had prepared from my pocket. A fake, empty one. The older man took it, looked at it, and threw it on the floor. You never learn, do you, old man? The sound of metal hitting cement made me freeze. He leaned closer, touching his finger to my chest. We gave you 24 hours, I replied, and I used it to think. Now I want to see you look me in the face and say you've never used anyone. The silence was brief but heavy. The man laughed again, this time angrily. You think you're the only one embarrassed? Some people pay to be humiliated and still appreciate it. The difference is, we profit from it. He gestured to his partner, who raised his phone and began filming. Just then, the sound of an engine appeared in the background. A car stopped on the other side. The young man emerged slowly, his hood over his head. He pretended to be just another customer. As the two criminals surrounded me, he stepped behind a pillar and turned on the recorder. Their every word was captured. "Say, old man, do you want me to send the video to your son now?" I clenched my fist. "Send it. I want to see. If he'll believe you more than me." The younger man approached. "You're bold, huh?" I took a half step back, gaining space. He grabbed my arm tightly, and that's when the young man appeared. "Let him go," the voice echoed. The older man turned and recognized him. "Look who's back, the protector of the failed." The boy replied, "I'm not a protector, I'm a witness." He showed his phone, discreetly blinking in recording mode. The older man took a step toward him. "You just signed your end, kid." The boy kept his gaze steady. "Or yours." The atmosphere grew tense. I could feel sweat running down the back of my neck, my heart pounding in my throat. The sound of a distant siren cut through the air. The two men looked at each other. The younger man pocketed his cell phone and muttered, "Let's get out of here before it gets worse." The older man tried to intimidate. "You don't know who you're messing with, old man. Shame kills more than bullets." I replied, "Maybe, but today you're the one." Running. They got in the car and disappeared into the darkness. The boy and I stood there, unsure if we'd won or just bought more time. He turned off the recorder and showed me the screen. The voices were there, clear, crisp. We did it. I sat on the curb, my whole body trembling. He sat beside me, saying nothing. We stared into space like someone watching their own fear pass by. On the way back, the silence between us was heavy, but not uncomfortable. When we got home, he closed the door, looked at me and said, "Now let's put this in a safe place. We'll decide what to do next tomorrow." I asked if he was sure we were safe. He replied, "No one's safe when they mess with people who live off other people's secrets." We stood facing each other for a few seconds. What was there wasn't shared desire, it was complicity. It was the kind of connection that arises when two people share the same fear. I touched his arm. He held my hand. For a moment, all that existed was the sound of our breathing and the tremor of what we didn't say. Then he went into the living room and lay down on the couch. I stayed in the kitchen, watching the recorder on the table. The light blinked slowly, like a heartbeat. I picked up the device, sat beside him, and let it play for a while. The man's voice echoed, "Shame kills more than bullets." I paused. The phrase kept spinning in my head. I looked at the boy, who was already asleep. For the first time in a long time, I felt I wasn't completely alone. "Now tell me, have you ever had to face someone stronger than you, even knowing you could lose? Have you ever risked everything just to regain the little piece you still had?" Write in the comments, "I faced it," or "I risked it," so I know there are people actually listening. And stay here, because what happens next is the kind of thing that changes everything. I woke before the sun. The boy was still asleep on the couch, his body covered with a blanket I'd thrown over him without him noticing. His breathing was light, calm, as if nothing had happened. But inside my head the noise was deafening. That man's voice kept echoing, "Shame kills more than bullets." I got up slowly and went to the kitchen. The refrigerator light came on, revealing the recorder on the table. The little red light blinked, begging for attention. For a moment I considered deleting everything and pretending it had never happened, but the fear of starting the cycle over again was stronger. I made coffee in silence. The sound of boiling water was the only noise that kept me awake. When he woke, he looked at me with that calm look of someone who knows more than he's letting on. "Did you sleep?" he asked. I nodded. "I tried." He stood up, picked up the cup, and drank the still hot coffee. "Today's going to be a tough day." I asked what he meant by that. He replied, "Recording was easy. Now comes the hard part, surviving what was recorded." We plugged the recorder back into the computer. The audio sounded clearer than I remembered. The voices of the two blackmailers were there, every threat, every word, every laugh. The young man separated the excerpts and said, "This is evidence. If anything happens, this material needs to be in more than one place." We made copies. I kept one. He saved the other on a small flash drive, tied it with string, and put it in a manila envelope. "This one's going to a friend of mine out of town. That way, if something goes wrong, they can't erase everything." When he left to deliver it, I was left alone with the sound of the wind hitting the window. The clock read 9 in the morning. That's when the landline rang, which it almost never did. I answered. On the other end, silence. And then a voice. "Thought you'd won, old man?" My body froze. It was the man in the hood. "You recorded it, right? You think we didn't see it? You think it was just a black car following you?" His breathing was heavy. "It's up to me now. And whoever's helping you. The click ended. The call. I stood still, the receiver in my hand, my heart racing. I ran out into the street, looking for the boy. Nothing. I called his cell phone, out of range. I waited, walked in circles, looked at every corner like someone trying to find a ghost. The hours passed slowly until he appeared, panting with a dirty coat and a cut on his arm. "They tried to follow me," he said, "but I managed to lose them." His voice trembled. I tried to hug him, but he pulled my hand away and added, "We can't stay here anymore, they know the address." In less than half an hour, the house looked like a battlefield. He packed up the laptop, the cables, the recorder, and the remaining envelope. I closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and we were left with only the lamp on in the living room. The plan now was to take everything to a safe place, perhaps a rented room in another neighborhood. But before leaving, he stopped at the door and looked at me. "Do you still trust me?" I replied. "After everything, it's the only thing I have left." He smiled sadly. "So listen to me. What's happening is bigger than we imagine. Those guys don't act alone. There are people in suits behind them, people who profit from other people's fears." We got in the car and drove to a remote neighborhood. It was drizzling, the windshield wipers scratching the glass like a nervous needle. The radio was muted, making the engine sound louder. He told me the retired cop had sent a message. "If there are any big names involved, don't turn anything over." "Wait." I asked what that meant. "It means you might have recorded people who shouldn't be exposed." We stopped in an abandoned parking lot to swap cars with an acquaintance of his. While we waited, he leaned his head against the steering wheel and closed his eyes. "You know what's worse," he said. "They don't just want to silence you, they want to make an example of you to scare others." I looked at him and replied, "If I have to be an example, let it be. To show that old men can fight too." The other car arrived, a grey sedan with rain-stained windows. The driver, a quiet gentleman, replaced the keys and drove away without looking back. We continued our journey to a simple guest house near the road. The room was small, with 2 beds and a locked window. He turned on his computer and began copying files to another device. Suddenly, the system froze. The screen flashed, and a message appeared. "Access denied. File compromised." He looked at me, startled. "They broke in. They're tracking everything." We immediately turned off the device. The fan's noise stopped, and silence fell. Outside, a car drove slowly by, the sound of tires in the mud echoing off the thin wall. We stood still, saying nothing. After a while, he broke the silence. "They'll try to find us before dawn." I asked what we should do. He replied, "Wait for the engine noise to stop and run. But first, there's something you need to know." His tone changed. It became more personal, more fragile. "I know the man who ordered you to be filmed. He was my boss. I was part of it, until I met you." My body froze. "You?" He nodded. "It was a job. One client at a time. We made money until I realized I wasn't filming sins, I was filming loneliness." He stepped closer. "That rainy night I was there, I was the one holding the camera. I felt the ground disappear." He continued, "But when I saw the way you looked at me, I stopped. And ever since, I've been trying to fix it." I was speechless. It was anger, it was shock, it was gratitude mixed with despair. "What now?" I asked. He replied, "Now is the part where we decide whether to run or fight." The sound of the engine outside returned, this time closer. The headlights pierced the thin curtain. We remained silent, breathing deeply, waiting for the next movement. "Now tell me, if it were you, would you trust the person who deceived you to try to save you later? Or would you run away alone?" Write in the comments, "I would trust," or "I would run away." I want to see how far you would go for someone who says they filmed you to protect you, because what happens next will shake you even deeper than anything that has happened so far. The car's headlights pierced the thin curtain and cast a streak of light on the ground. We stood there, breathing deeply, until the sound of the engine grew closer. The man motioned me to stand behind the door and grabbed an iron bar leaning against the wall. The doorknob turned. Slowly, one step, then another. I felt my heart pound in my throat. When the door opened, the streetlight revealed a tall shadow and a voice I would recognize even in the dark. "Dad?" The iron fell from the boy's hand. I froze. It was my son, the same one who, weeks ago, looked at me in the backyard and said, "Never again." He was there, thinner, his face tired, his gaze confused between anger and fear. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "I got a message with your name. Video. They said they'd kill you if I didn't come." I looked at the boy, who lowered his head in silence. "They sent him the video," I whispered. My son came in, still suspicious. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing at the boy. I tried to answer, but he continued. "It's him from the video, right? The same one from the backyard." The words hung heavy in the air. The boy tried to explain. "The story isn't what it seems." My son interrupted. "No story at all. I saw it." His anger was old, pent up. He looked at me as if seeing a stranger. "You disappeared, Dad. I thought you were ashamed of your family, but now I understand. The shame was of your truth." I tried to get closer. "I didn't lie to you out of malice." He took a step back. Lying is inherently evil. The tension was an impossible knot to untie. Then the sound of the car outside returned, louder. The boy looked out the window and whispered, "They found us." Within seconds, fear replaced the argument. Lights moved in the street. Shadows crossed the gate. "3 men," the boy said. "One of them is the one in the hood." My son looked at me, startled. "Who are they?" I replied. "People who make money off other people's fears." The boy turned off the lights, locked the door, and handed me the recorder. "If anything happens, run to the kitchen, get the false bottom of the cabinet, and put it in there. No one will find it." He picked up the iron again. "They come to silence, not to negotiate." The sound of footsteps grew, closer. The wood of the porch creaked. Suddenly a voice shouted from outside, "Come out, old man, your time has come." My son went pale. "What's happening, Dad?" I replied quietly. "The result of a lifetime of trying to hide who I am." The boy signaled for silence. The footsteps stopped. The silence stretched for a few seconds. Then the window glass shattered with a stone. The curtain flew. The boy pulled my son to the ground. A second later, one of the men kicked the door and entered. The boy reacted quickly, slamming the iron into the intruder's hand. The scream echoed through the hallway. Another man tried to jump out the window but slipped on the wet floor. The house became a chaos of noise, fear, and heavy breathing. I tried to protect my son, but he slipped from my grasp and ran to help the boy. He grabbed a chair and shoved it against the third man, who staggered back. It was the first time I'd seen courage on his face since I was a child. The 3 of them backed away, and the sound of a distant siren mingled with the wind. "The police are coming," one of them shouted. "We'll be back." The car sped off, disappearing down the dirt road. The 3 of us stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by broken glass and heavy breathing. The boy threw the iron on the floor and fell to his feet. My son was still shaking. You almost died, Dad." I touched his shoulder. "And you almost saved me." The silence that followed was no longer the same as before. It wasn't one of shame. It was one of understanding. The young man stood up, wiped the blood from his arm, and looked at my son. "They're coming back. We need to leave before nightfall." My son replied, "I'm going with you." I stared at him, surprised. "After everything?" He took a deep breath. "I don't understand what you do for a living, or what you feel, but I understand what it's like to be threatened, and I won't let them take you." That moment broke years of distance. It was as if never again had become. There's still time. We left through the back door carrying the recorder and laptop. The street felt like an escape route. The sky was beginning to lighten, and the smell of rain returned. We walked without speaking until the young man stopped and said, "We're going to a safe place. A friend of mine can help deliver this to the press." My son was startled. "The press? You want to release the video?" The young man explained. "Not the one in the backyard, but the others. The evidence, James, the voices, they need to be exposed." I looked at them both and felt the weight of the decision. Reporting them meant ending the blackmail, but also the little peace I had left. "If they do that," my son said, "they'll come after us." The boy replied, "They're already after us." A clap of thunder cut through the air. We stopped walking. The young man put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Today we decide whether we'll keep running or whether we'll face it." My son looked at me, his eyes welling up. "What if all this destroys our family for good?" I replied. "Family doesn't end when the truth comes out. It begins." For a moment, the 3 of us stood in silence, listening only to the sound of the rain beginning to fall again. I realized there was no turning back. Fear, desire, shame, and love were all mixed together on the same sodden ground. From then on, every step would be a choice between hiding or existing. Now tell me, man to man, if it were your son seeing you like this, would you have the courage to tell everything, or would you hide it until the end? Write in the comments, "I would tell," or "I would hide." I want to know how far a man's courage goes when truth and love intersect, because what comes next will change everything you think about forgiveness and redemption. The rain thickened and beat against the glass as if the sky wanted to erase the world. We drove along the wet road, the three of us silent, our hearts beating in unison. The young man drove. I held the recorder in my lap, and my son looked out the window, his face half hidden in the shadows. The plan was simple. Deliver the evidence to a journalist the young man knew, someone who exposed similar schemes. But, as life teaches, the simplest things are always the most complicated. We arrived at the indicated address, an old building with a peeling sign and a barely working doorbell. The young man rang twice, and a tall man with glasses opened the door. "Is that you?" he asked. The young man nodded. "Did you bring everything?" He replied. "More than I should have." We entered. The smell of burnt coffee and old paper filled the air. The journalist sat down at a computer and asked, "Show me what you have." The young man connected the recorder and copied the files to his system. He began listening to the audio snippets, voices, threats, names. "This is serious," he said. "There are big names involved. This could end up on television." I felt a chill in my stomach. Not television. "For God's sake." The young man put his hand on my shoulder. "Calm down, he knows what he's doing." The journalist turned to me and said, "Do you understand the risk? If you publish this, you'll become a symbol. But symbols also bleed." As he spoke, I noticed a light blinking in the corner of the room. A modem with loose wires was trying to connect. "The signal's bad," he said. "I'll send it to the cloud so it's safe." The young man warned him, "Just be careful what you upload. There's personal stuff in there." The man assured him, "I know how to separate evidence from private information, but haste makes waste." Within seconds, the upload began. Folders upon folders flashed across the screen, and among them, one with my name on it. The young man realized it too late. "Cancel it, not this one." The journalist tried to stop it, but the system froze. The fan's noise increased, and the screen froze with a message, "File uploaded successfully." The silence that followed was the heaviest of my life. The boy paled. "Everything went up." My son asked, "Everything what?" And when the boy answered, the world fell apart. The backyard video. My heart seemed to stop. "You're saying that?" "Yes," he interrupted. "The video is on the internet." I stood up slowly, my vision darkening. The journalist tried to justify himself. "It was automatic, I swear I didn't know." But it was too late. The sound of the boy's cell phone broke the air. Notifications, messages, alerts. He opened a social network. "It's spreading." My son picked up the phone and saw it. His face changed. First surprise, then anger, then something I'd never seen before. Pain. "That's you, Dad. That's you, and—" He didn't finish his sentence. He threw the phone on the table and left the room. I followed him. He was in the hallway, his eyes welling up. "You know what's worse," he said. "I'm not ashamed of what you did. I'm ashamed of what they're going to do to you." That sentence pierced me. I wanted to hug him, but he pulled away. "People don't understand, Dad. They'll call you all sorts of things. They'll laugh, and you don't deserve that." I replied quietly, "My son, my whole life I hid who I was so as not to embarrass you. And even then I lost you. Now, perhaps being who I am, I'll find you again." He wiped his face. "What if I can't bear to see all this?" I said. "Then close your eyes, but not your heart." We returned to the room. The journalist tried to delete the files, but it was too late. News sites are replicating it. The story will come out. They didn't just steal your story, they stole your silence. The young man paced back and forth, distressed. "We need to disappear for a few days." I sat down. "Why? To run away again? They've already seen me. They already know my face. There's no point in running anymore." The sound of rain sounded like the applause of an invisible audience. My son leaned against the wall and looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "You're stronger than I imagined." The boy approached. "They'll talk, but you're not alone. We're together." That night the news spread like wildfire. Videos, screenshots, comments. Some called me brave, others sick. The street that once saw me as an ordinary man now saw me as a headline. At the garage, paint was thrown on the gate. At the market, whispers were made as I passed. But among the insults were messages from men who said, "You gave me courage." My son saw all of this up close. And one day, after reading dozens of comments, he said to me, "Maybe this all happened so other people don't have to hide who they are." I looked at him and replied, "Maybe it happened so I can stop hiding too." The young man arrived, his face weary but his gaze firm. "The criminals are gone. Their footage was used in the report. They fell." I asked, "And us?" He replied, "We survived." But peace didn't come immediately. It came slowly, like the morning after a storm. Still, each step felt like a new beginning. And even with my shame exposed, I discovered a strength I never imagined I had. Now answer me honestly. If the world saw your soul naked, would you endure it? Or would you still hide behind a name, a role, a fear? Right below, I would endure it, or I would still hide it. I want to read what you feel, because what comes now is the moment when everything truly changes, when the past knocks on the door and exacts the price of courage. The days that followed were a mix of enforced calm and invisible war. The news continued to circulate on social media, and every time I went outside I felt the weight on my eyes. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fatigue, a kind of exhaustion that comes not from the body, but from the soul. The noise of the world pierced me, but inside the house everything was different. The guy now lived with me. He slept in the back room and worked nights at some job. His son came to visit me every day, without saying much, but with a lighter look in his eyes than before. One morning, while I was sweeping the yard, he arrived with a shopping bag. "I brought coffee," he said. I smiled. "Do you still remember how I like it?" He replied, "With too much sugar," and he laughed. It had been a long time since I'd heard that laugh. We sat on the porch, the smell of coffee wafting up on the wind. He told me his grandson had asked about me. He said, "Grandpa became famous." I asked what he said. He said Grandpa had courage. Those words echoed inside me. Courage. My whole life I thought courage meant not being afraid. Now I knew it was the opposite. Courage is being afraid and going anyway. While we were talking, the boy came out of the room and joined us. He stood awkwardly, holding a mug. His gaze met my son's. For a moment, no one said anything, until my son said, "I judged you without understanding. I thought you were the reason my father was ashamed. But today I see that you were the reason he didn't give up." The boy lowered his head. "I just tried to fix what I broke." My son replied, "And you did." There in that backyard where it all began, something changed. It wasn't a movie forgiveness. It wasn't a soap opera hug. It was just a new silence, the kind of silence that no longer hurts. Time passed. People stopped talking. Other stories emerged and the scandal faded. A reporter even tried to interview me, but I declined. "My story has been told too much," I replied. I returned to the workshop, to the familiar sound of tools, to the smell of grease that always reminded me of who I was before, but now I worked differently, without hiding. One afternoon, the young man arrived with an envelope. "Remember the journalist?" he asked. He sent this. Inside was a magazine with an article, "The Man Who Turned Shame into Courage." The article talked about me without mentioning the video. It spoke of men who decided to live unapologetically for existing. I read in silence. When I finished, I closed my eyes. I thought about how many of us grow old hiding who we are for fear of losing love, respect, or reputation. That night, the house was quiet. My son was gone, the boy was asleep, and I was left alone on the porch. The wind blew the same way it had that rainy night, the night it all began. The gate swayed slightly. I looked at the now clean yard and felt a strange urge to laugh. I thought, if someone had told me, years ago, that I would be remembered not for fixing cars, but for fixing truth itself, I would have laughed out loud. But life has these ironies. It breaks you down and then presents you whole. I grabbed the recorder, still tucked away in the drawer. I pressed play. The blackmailer's voices no longer frightened me. They seemed distant, like echoes from a past that no longer belonged to me. I left the device playing and went to the boy's room. He woke up startled. "Did something happen?" he asked. "No," I replied. "I want to show you something." I went back to the living room and loaded another file. The one of our conversation. Accidentally recorded the night everything went down. We listened to each other. The pauses, the breaths, the tremors. "This is what's left," I said. "The raw truth, unedited, unashamed." He sat beside me. "You don't need to justify yourself anymore." I looked at him and replied, "It's not justification. It's memory. It's a reminder of the price of being who we are." In the middle of the night, my son returned. He knocked on the door slowly. He was leading his grandson by the hand. He wanted to meet Grandpa. The boy looked at me and asked, "Is it true you're famous?" I laughed. "Sort of." He continued, "And is it true they called you brave?" I leaned down and said, "Sometimes courage is just not lying to yourself." My son watched me silently. There was a quiet pride in his gaze, something beyond words. I extended my hand and he shook it. It was a simple gesture, but it weighed like a lifetime. In that moment, I understood that forgiveness doesn't come when the other person forgets. It comes when love speaks louder than shame. The sun was beginning to rise. Light streamed in through the window and touched the walls of the room, the same place where before there had been only shadow. I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, the air felt light. I looked at my son, at the young man, at my grandson. 3 generations, 3 forms of courage. Life never went back to the way it was before. And thank goodness, because before, I lived in hiding. Now, even with the scars, the flaws, the past completely exposed, I was truly living. The fear still existed, but fear no longer ruled me. If you've made it this far, it's because this story touched you in some way. So do the following. Before leaving, write the word here in the comments, courage, because that's what life needs to be truly lived. Take advantage and leave a like, because it's your like that shows me and YouTube that it's worth continuing to tell stories that speak to the hearts of real men, stories that many people experience, but almost no one has the courage to say out loud. And if you are not yet registered, subscribe to the channel now. There are many more stories coming, stories that will move you in the same way this one did. Also, click on next video that is appearing on the screen. Stay with me because there the conversation goes even deeper. Here we don't speak to impress, we speak to awaken what was silent inside you.